I want to give a quick shout out to all my patrons. Thank you so much for all of the continued support. Hey everybody, this is Matt from Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews, and today I'm going to be going over my list of the top 10 biggest fantasy and sci-fi series that I will not finish. I'm going to be quantifying my top 10 based on ranked from the lowest amount of Goodreads reviews to the highest. And all of these have an absolute ton of Goodreads reviews. So let's start with number 10, and this is Night Angel by Brent Weeks, and this has a whopping 165,000 Goodreads reviews. And God, I could not connect with this one at all. I mean, so I read the first book, really excited, because I liked Lightbringer by Brent Weeks. I thought it was really good, and I found it to be underrated. I thought that a lot of the complaints that people had with them were overblown, had some problems. There's some of the similar problems that a lot of people had, but not nearly to the degree that I kind of felt that other people had. So I go into the Night Angel thinking like, oh, we're going to read this assassin story, and it's just going to be a really fun time with really good writing. And it was just a bore. I mean, nothing entertaining happened to me throughout the first, 3/4 of the first book. Like, some things happened, but it was just like this character piece on characters that I didn't care about. It was written in this total, it almost felt like amateurish the way that it was written compared to Lightbringer. And it just totally zapped all of my energy for the series. And yeah, I don't really get what people see out of this thing. Maybe the series just gets way better in future books, but I haven't heard terribly pleasant things about the future books, especially the one that was written more recently. I forgot what the name of it was, but they wrote like a new one to the series, even though it kind of seemed like the series was wrapped up, and I didn't really hear great things about that one either. So, yep, I'm out. Number 9 is Murderbot by Martha Wells. This has 200,000 Goodreads ratings, and I honestly don't see what other people see in this series. I mean, I did at the beginning. So I read the first Murderbot book, and I say read because I want to distinctly say that I did not buy it. I got it from the library, and I say that because these books are the biggest ripoff in fantasy books or sci-fi books, in books in general, because these books cost the price of a full-length series, but they're all novellas. At most, it almost feels like short stories. They are like 100 pages long, but they're priced like $15 a piece. That is highway robbery. So yeah, if you can get them at the library, great, but don't go pay top dollars for these things. That doesn't make sense to me. But the first book was interesting. It was fun. But then as I kept reading more in the series, and I think I read 5 books in the series, I'm caught up. But I just won't keep going further because I know there's a few books left in the series to be written still. I think 3. But it's just like the same thing being just regurgitated over and over and over. Obviously, there's differences, but they're very minor. I mean, you can see the basic plot structure of all these things. You see the character that Murderbot is without doing positive character development. It's just like Martha Wells hit the jackpot with this thing. I bet she's making tons of money off this. She said, these things are going to sell no matter what. Let's not upset the apple cart. Let's just keep doing what people are liking and not innovate. And maybe that was a great business decision for Martha Wells, but from an enjoyment standpoint, from Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews, yeah, I need something new to be able to keep me interested. And Murderbot's just not doing it. Number 8 is Broken Earth by N.K. Jemisin. This has 250,000 Goodreads ratings, and I hated this thing. I went into it with the highest of expectations. I mean, this series has the only series that's ever won 3 Hugos for the best novel for a trilogy. And I'd heard really only positive things from this. But pretty much out of the gate, I didn't connect with it at all. And the 5th season just nothing about the book worked. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that. I thought the world building was cool. I liked it, especially near the beginning when it was all just kind of setting up and there's this mysterious aspect to it. You're trying to discover the world as the characters are kind of piecing through it. That was fun, but that's the only fun that I had. I didn't enjoy the characters in it. I didn't enjoy the way the characters acted. But more than anything, I hated the writing style. I couldn't get over the fact that this author is using the second person for a third of the book. Obviously, there's a reason for it that will make sense later on. but it doesn't excuse the fact that there's a reason second person is almost never used. It doesn't really work at a literary format. Maybe some people have done it and you think it's awesome. Great for you. I'm glad you do. But there's a reason that it is not even close to popularized. It's very hard to follow along. It just feels like an artistic choice that doesn't work. The twist on this was horrible. And yeah, so many things I didn't like that there's no way I'm going to expose myself to more of this writing. Maybe I'll give N.K. Jemisin a chance. Maybe if people tell me like, yeah, this is a distinct style that she uses for this book, but another series that kind of switches it up, yeah, I'll try it out, but not this series. Number 7, The Expanse by James S.A. Corey, which is 2 people. I don't know their names, but this is like the name they use when they combine their names to make a different pen name. This has 253,000 Goodreads ratings. And this is the only one on this list that I, maybe might try later on. And because I didn't hate it. I gave, I think, the first book a 4 and then like a 3.5 and maybe a 3 for the third one. But at that point, I was just like, look, the trajectory is not right. This is a 9 or 10 or 11 book series. I think it's either 9 or 11. I don't think it's 10. Maybe it is, but I don't think it is. And I want to say 9. And I want to see the books get better and better, or at least stay the same. But if I'm going downhill on this, that's not good. And it doesn't make me excited to keep reading in the series. But I never hated anything. Just nothing ever really gripped me. I struggle with this sometimes with sci-fi books and sci-fi series, is that I'm not primarily a sci-fi guy. Now, some sci-fi I'm over the moon for and just absolutely adore. I've read some wonderful sci-fi this year, most notably The Sun Eater by Christopher Ruocchio. I can't get enough of it. And there's others out there too that I thoroughly enjoy. But it's harder for me. And I wanted things out of this that I didn't get. I wanted this grander, epic story because it's told in this grand, epic, sprawling universe that I kept getting this kind of micro story here that I just couldn't quite connect with. So many promising things to it that I keep thinking about it. But yeah, it's going to be hard for me to say I'm going to prioritize this over the hundreds of other books that I'm interested in that I don't have time to read. Number 6 is The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. This has 344,000 Goodreads ratings. And my ratings for these books, I don't think are reflective of what I actually think, because when I read these things, I liked them. But my interest over time wanes. Now, I think there's 2 things I could say about that. One is I read a lot of them back to back to back. And I did this early on in my fantasy reading, journey. And so I didn't really know what I liked or didn't like. So I kind of just felt like I liked everything. I was reading the top hits, reading Stormlight, Mistborn, the top stuff. And I kind of liked it all. So I read this and I was like, okay, it's cool. I like it. But I feel like I got burnt out. I read too much back to back that it wasn't giving me what I wanted. But the more I read, the more I realized these major problems I had with the writer and the way that he portrays Dresden and the way that he portrays women in this story. Now, I don't read a lot of stories going like, oh, you need to, write women in a strong way. And, people that talk bad about women, I'm not going to read your books. But this one was just kind of creepy in so many ways. And I think maybe one of the big reasons I could say that, because it's certainly not as bad or as creepy as lots of other books and series that I read. But the fact that it is a modern day book told in like modern day Chicago makes it worse. The way that people treat women in this book rubs me a much weirder way than a book set in this kind of ancient times when that felt like more normal for the people that were living there. That doesn't feel normal in this series. And it just feels like Jim Butcher is a strange dude that views women in a very strange way. And furthermore, I didn't really ever love Dresden outside of the women's stuff. He never connected with me. And I need to really connect with the story that's a first-person point of view. I need to connect with that main character. And the one positive thing that I really will take away from this is I thought that the audiobook narration by Jane Marsters was wonderful. I mean, top-tier stuff. Loved the voice that he gave Dresden. And quite frankly, if it wasn't for that audiobook narrator, I probably would have jumped out of the series a lot earlier than it did. I made it to Changes, which I feel like is like 8, 9, 10 books in, which is a lot of books in to be able to kind of give it a shot. But if it's not connecting with me at the point when people say that's when you should be in love with it, then yeah, it's just not for me. Number 5 is The Witcher by 𝐿andrei Sapkowski. This has 345,000 Goodreads ratings. And this is probably the biggest one here that I just don't, I don't get it. I get even why some people like the 5th season, The Broken Earth. I don't like it, but I get why people like it. I don't get it here. I have theories on that maybe a lot of people liked it when it was written in its native language, and when it got translated, maybe it lost something. Maybe it's a cultural thing. Maybe people that are, different cultures react differently to different sources of media. And maybe it just clicked with, is it Poland? Is that where it's from? I want to say Poland, but I could be wrong. Sorry, Witcher fans. Sorry, 𝐿andrei Sapkowski, for maybe not getting that right, but I think I got it right. But yeah, it just didn't click. It felt, maybe if it was like one of your first fantasy books you've ever read, but reading other stuff, it just has so many problems. The short stories were okay to good. The main novels, though, the story that was being told just is lacking in so many ways. The characters feel so flat. The story never really goes anywhere. And I wanted it to be kind of more like the video games, which I thought were awesome and told a really compelling story. But the story I got here just lacked in so many ways that I just and truly left dumbstruck at how popular this is. Even before the TV show on Netflix, even before the video games. This was a massively popular series, and I don't get it. Number 4 is Red Rising by Pierce Brown, and I'm now realizing that I lied earlier when I said that The Expanse was the only series that I could maybe see myself getting into someday, because I could maybe see myself getting into Red Rising in someday. This has 375,000 ratings, and yeah, I felt like the books, I read 4 of them. I read the initial trilogy, and then I read the first one from the next era of the books, and I thought they were all decent. Decent to good. But again, there's so many fantasy books out there that I have yet to read that if I'm not really gelling with a series by 4 books in, then why am I investing my time into it? I felt like the initial trilogy ended in a really wonderful way. It didn't try to answer all the questions, but it answered the important ones. It subverted my expectations. It was dramatic. It was big. It was impressive. And then the 4th book hit, and almost nothing was enjoyable for me out of that 4th book. It introduced new point of view characters. I love that it tried to do that, but I felt like it was a swing and a miss. I didn't enjoy the other characters brought in, and I didn't, quite frankly, enjoy that we were going to be told this story that started to continue, that in my view, didn't need to be told. It felt like things ended in a really nice way. Now, I've said that before, and I get people telling me, yeah, that's true when you read the 4th book, but as you read the 5th book, I think it's Dark Age, that all changes. It's wonderful. It's one of the best books in the series, and it starts to become really relevant. It makes sense why this story is being told. And I think the only reason I'm saying that I might read this is just kind of putting some trust in the people that have told me that. But it's not enough trust for me to say, yeah, let's jump you back up to the top of the old TBR pile. So this is going to stay on the indefinitely not being read. We'll see if it changes sometime in the future. But somebody, I think, did put this on my Patreon raffle, so there isn't a chance that it gets picked, and then I have to read it. So we'll see. Number 3 is The Dark Tower by Stephen King. This has 594,000 ratings, and yeah, I don't like Stephen King. I've come to realize that over time, some things are not for me, and Stephen King is one of those people. And Stephen King is one of those maybe like the biggest writer out there in like this generation, or up there, top few, right? He's huge. So clearly it's not a Stephen King thing, right? Clearly it's a Matt thing when somebody's this big. But nothing that Stephen King writes clicks for me. Now, I haven't read any of his horror stuff. I've read the fantasy stuff. I read The Stand. I read the one with a date in it about JFK. I'm not even going to try to do the date. And I read the first 2 books in the Dark Tower, and I know there's other fantasy books out there that he's written, but he just doesn't do it for me, especially from a fantasy standpoint. Fantasy stories, to be successful, I think, need to be very carefully plotted out. You need to know where you're going with the story. Fantasy is not necessarily a character study. Now, fantasy books that are wonderful character studies, like Robin Hobb, are wonderful, and it makes them even better. But fantasy books need to be charting forward, going towards this definitive ending, and how to just plot things out. Good fantasy authors need to outline. Stephen King just doesn't do that. Stephen King starts, and then he just takes a bunch of drugs and he writes. Maybe he doesn't do that anymore. But he would just write and write and write and let the characters take him where he wants to go. That's really good if you want to read a book about fun characters. But it's really bad for a fantasy series when you need to actually tell a story and wrap things up with a nice beginning, middle, and end. And I just feel like that didn't happen in any of the books I read, and it certainly wasn't happening in the Dark Tower. It was clear that it was a meandering, in my view, a mess. Now, some people might love that mess. Not might. A lot of people love that mess. I think they should recognize that it is kind of a mess. It's a jumble. It's all over the place. But I've also been told by almost everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody, but the ending is truly atrocious. Some people say it's wonderful, but most of everybody I've heard from says it is very, very Stephen King in the ending, and I'm not here for it. Unless you want to just hear me rant, maybe some of you do. I don't really want to go through that, and I'm not going to do it. Number 2, we're almost done here. And number 2 is Dune by Frank Herbert. This has 1.2 million Goodreads ratings. I read Dune a long time ago before I kind of got back into fantasy. I did the audiobook, and I thought it was wonderful. The audiobook was like a full theatrical presentation with different actors and sounds. It's really good stuff. It's old. It feels old, but it's fun. But I didn't love the ending. I loved the science fiction aspects to it. I loved the huge worms. I loved the Fremen, or however you say it. I haven't watched the movies. I don't really watch TV or movies. And I loved all these different aspects to it, but it never gelled perfectly together to become this like huge epic story. I felt like as it ended, obviously it's teeing up other books, but I just didn't have that compelling force driving me forward and saying, yeah, you got to read more of these things. I was like, yeah, I read it. It was cool. I think I'm done. And I also, while I have heard positive things about some of them, I've also heard there's a certain point which you should stop reading them, and that's not great. I want a good ending to a series, and knowing that people are telling me, yeah, read half the series and then stop reading, that's not a ringing endorsement, and doesn't make me want to keep reading. And number 1 is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. And this has a little bit more than Dune, 1.3 million Goodreads ratings. And this is another one that I really enjoyed. It's very reads like a YA book. Maybe it's not, but is what I remember it. It's a long time since I read it, but it read kind of like a YA story. It had those moments that Stormlight Archive does, where it's like trying to make you do this rah thing a lot, which is fun. It wants you to cheer for the protagonist. It's got an all-time great twist in the story, and if you read this or watched the movie, or I think there's a movie, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Just truly wonderful stuff. But it ended, right? And it didn't feel like there should be a next book. And everyone that I've heard from tells me that, yeah, read the first one, don't keep reading. And it makes sense. It feels, I've heard the tone totally shifts in these stories. It's about a totally different thing than kind of the first one was, because the first one just wrapped up the story so nicely. I feel like a lot of times stories need to have a good ending. And when they hit it, authors need to go, okay, I did it, I'm done. But they milk it, right? They're like, this worked, let me just keep trying to rack in the cash. And I felt like that, maybe that's not what happened here. It seems like that's what's happened here, and I'm good. Okay, so that is it for me. Let me know down in the comments what I missed. What are some of yours that are on this list of series that you're not going to finish that didn't make it on my list? So that's it. Thank you so much for watching this, and as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, Gregory, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, 𝐿, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Fanixan, Harry B, Joe, Kat Mick, Maria, Michael Sugarman, Sky, TW57, Wacky, and Zion. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.